Hello, this is Romanosky from Calgary, Canada, shooting from the Lugnuts facility, and what I have for you here today is a Citroen 2CV. This is a model year 1985, so this is a very technically interesting car with some ingenious solutions to all kinds of problems, particularly the suspension, but not limited to that. It's a very minimalist car. It's just a really cool machine, not just in terms of, it's different, it's French, it's, it's cute, etc. But also the lineage of the design and so on. There's a lot of really, really interesting things about Citroen as a company and about the 2CV. And 2CVs find themselves in all kinds of important collections with multi-million-dollar cars, and they're some of these really fancy rallies like the California Melee and stuff like that have Citroen 2CVs in them, and they're widespread popular culture and everything from Tintin books and comics to James Bond movies, etc. So it's a really neat car. It'd be a welcome addition to any collection, really, and also just a fun car to have around. Maybe long highway trips in North America aren't its forte, but for driving around the city and stuff, they're great fun. So I'll turn this camera around and we'll go through this video. We'll do a little bit of the history of Citroen and the 2CV. There's better sources for that information than me, but I'll sort of hit on the highlights. I'll give my take on it as to, where Citroen might fit in, in the larger sort of collector car world. We'll go through this particular example, and we'll go around and do a walk around video of the car inside and out. We did a lot of photographs underneath the car showing its condition. We'll do a paint meter report just to show you the paint depth of the original panels, and then we'll top it off with a running and cold start and driving video. So it'll be pretty comprehensive. But by the end of it, you'll get a pretty good idea of what we're dealing with. And anyway, I hope you enjoy the video, either, just some more information on a Citroen 2CV, if that's an interesting car to you, or if you'd like to purchase this example, which is for sale now in Calgary in late April 2023. Okay, turn this camera around. Okay, so the Citroen 2CV, the Volkswagen Beetle, Fiat 500, the original Land Rover, the Unimog, Austin A40, and I forget what else. I imagine there's others. These cars were all mass-produced after World War II, and were all designed to offer simple, reliable transportation to the masses, often being families' first car and only car, and often replacing horses. So the objective of the governments in the late 40s was to get people mobile. In different countries, they were much different. The design criteria differed by the country in which the cars were produced. For instance, in Germany, they had the Autobahns, which were developed under Hitler in the late mid to late 30s, and the Volkswagen Beetle was designed to go 100 kilometers an hour, and I think use 7 liters per 100 kilometers of fuel, and seat 4 people, and that was its design objective. In France, the roads were, nothing like the Autobahn. They were barely paved, and so the Citroen 2CV was designed with the rough roads and fields which the cars would normally have to go across. And the design parameters for this car, in addition to being inexpensive to buy, inexpensive to operate, and reliable, was to transport a carton of eggs across a rough farmer's field, an unplowed field. So that's how this car came about, and The Land Rover was that came out at the same year as this in 1948, and it was designed as a mobile power source for farmers and ranchers. The Unimog was designed to offer, jumpstart the German industry, it was very restricted after World War II, and agriculture was one of the areas that the Allies would allow the Germans to make vehicles for, and so the Unimog was a product of that. So what happened is all of these cars, and the Fiat 500, again, offering mobility and often a first car and the only car to families. So all of these cars were developed with similar purposes, but in different parts of the world with different roads and different design objectives, whatever. What's really interesting, to me at least, is that they've all become like design icons. But they were never styled, in the current sense. The bonnet isn't ribbed on this 2CV for as a styling exercise. It's a thin piece of metal and it adds strength. So there's nothing about this car that was done as a styling exercise. It's all completely functional. And, same with the Beetle, and same with the Fiat 500, and same with the Land Rover, etc. Yet, they've all become style icons, which I think is really interesting. So, so I think that it is a really important car when you look at, mobility in the 20th century. Cars like the Beetle, they sold 20 million Beetles. They sold 10 million of these, I think mostly because they didn't come to North America in any numbers. I don't know what the Fiat 500 sales are, but it's in the millions somewhere. So all these cars then are incredibly significant in the terms of the social history of the automobile and mobility in the 20th century. Okay, and they also have the characteristics of extremely long production runs. This was in production from 1948 to 1990. The Beetle was similar. They're still making something that looks like vaguely looks like a Land Rover. The original Land Rover was, again, 1948 to, I think, 1985 before they changed it to a Defender. And even that carried on until just recently. So, that is one reason to add a Citroen 2CV to your collection, as it just represents one nation's take on mobilizing the population. Okay, so that's interesting in itself. You could have a great collection of post-war cars like that. In Germany, I think they were in a lot rougher shape, and so in the 50s, what you got is all the micro cars. Anyway, so that's one reason why I think that it's just a really significant car. And the second reason is that the technical solutions to the problems, so how to make a cheap car, how to make it with few parts, how to make it easily serviceable, how to get long travel suspension in the car, how to make it space efficient. If it was your only car and you had a larger item, well, you'd need to put it through the roof, and that's that. They don't have a convertible roof, because it was trendy or for people to get suntans. The roof peels back so you can put more stuff in it. The suspension is especially sort of ingenious. There's no coil springs. I'll flash some pictures of what it looks like, but you have these sort of bananas coming down that look like the rear trailing arm of a Porsche 911, but you have them front and rear, and then they're interconnected with basically an air spring that lives in the sills. And it has the really unique characteristic that as you weigh down the car, and the suspension arms then extend, and your wheelbase actually increases with the amount of load the car has. It's really the cleverest thing, with very, very few moving parts, and it achieves what they needed to achieve. So it's just extremely clever. Now, the designer of the 2CV Andre Lefebvre, and he started at Voisin, which is a pre-war French coach-built company. I mean, I've seen Voisin's win at Pebble Beach. There's a great museum. Peter Mullen, who's a really big collector of pre-war French cars, Bugattis and Talbot Legos and etc. And he's got a section in his museum in Oxnard, California for Voisin. They're spectacular, some of the craziest interiors you've ever seen, spectacular cars. And then he went to Citroen after Voisin, and Voisin was an aircraft manufacturer as well. And then he came up with, along with Bertoni, who's an Italian but worked for Citroen, and they developed the Citroen Traction Avant, the first mass-produced front-wheel drive car, the 2CV, and also the Citroen DS and NID. So three of the most significant cars of the 20th century were created by Citroen and by Andre Lefebvre. So you've got a great sort of styling and engineering lineage with some really great minds, and that's why these cars are kind of classless, same way a Mini is, where they can just be in any collection, driven by absolutely anybody. And the more I've studied Citroen and Andre's Citroen and the history of the company, they were innovative in so many interesting ways. Not just the cars, but the advertising. I mean, Citroen put his name on the Eiffel Tower for I think almost 10 years. They to promote the company, they sponsored all these overland expeditions, crazy expeditions where they would through Africa. There's even one near Calgary, up into Banff, where they'd have these Kagas half tracks, and they'd try to go to the North Pole or through the Sahara or whatever. They'd have to disassemble the car and carry the pieces across certain parts. It was crazy expeditions, but Citroen sponsored those. The ads are completely nuts from the 50s and 60s, kind of crazy French ads, and it just appeals to kind of hardcore auto enthusiasts. Jay Leno's got a couple of great videos on Citroen, and it's just a really neat company full of very interesting technical solutions, of cool design, of risk taking. It all caught up with Andre Citroen, and Michelin wound up buying the company. And then slowly, cars have become more normalized, and they've really kind of lost, most of their uniqueness. Now going to electric cars, they all have the similar platforms anyway. So it's just not true anymore that the cars are really significantly different from one another. Most of the cars are pretty much the same. I mean, you go to a parking lot, it's difficult to even find your car sometimes because they all look the same. But in the late 40s and in the 50s, when each nationality, each government, they came up with their own solution to mobilizing the population. Well, the cars were just so incredibly different, yet effective for their own market. So, the 2CV could only be French, the Fiat 500 could only be Italian, the Mini could only be English, etc. Okay, so enough about that. It's just a really cool car, and like I said, they're in, they can be in any collection. Okay, so we've got the big block 602cc engine, 29 horsepower, I think. We've got a 4-speed gearbox with synchromesh on second, third, and fourth gear. Okay, so that's the powertrain of the Citroen, which is the most highly developed of the 2CV range. In the 80s, it got inboard front disc brakes, and this car has the inboard front disc brakes. So from a technical power, usability standpoint, this would be, the most highly developed of the Citroen 2CVs. Okay. There were Citroen 2CV vans and other body configurations. So this is the standard one. I think the first 2CVs had the fabric top that went all the way down to the bumper. I think that was quickly changed. And I think there's a notchback version as well. So this would be the sort of regular body 2CV. There were some special editions of it. This one is the Club. There were some special editions with two-tone paint that are called Charlestons, and many other special editions, and this isn't one of them. So this would be the standard 1985 2CV. I think they only exported the larger engine versions. I'm not sure. Sometime in the 80s anyway. Okay. The 2CV was built in many countries. It was slow in England. It was built in South America. And this one, I believe, is built in France. For whatever reason, the Netherlands seems to be a hot spot for vintage Citroens, and there have been a number of restoration companies in the Netherlands that have restored and exported these cars. I remember seeing the first DS21, like the first Concours DS21. I saw it at the Monterey Car Week, and it was also restored in the Netherlands. And so this car was too. And the restoration is about 10 years old. It was restored. It was given a fresh restoration with a new galvanized frame, and then it was bought by a Calgary guy through a U.S. importer. Okay, so he's had the car for 10 years, put a few thousand kilometers on it, and it's basically in the same condition it was when it was restored. Okay. So I think with any classic car, Citroen or otherwise, the condition of the body and chassis and frame, is the most important thing. And generally, if the body shell is okay, even if the rest of the car needs work, it's still salvageable. Whereas if the body shell's rotten, what you've got is a parts car. So the way we check the integrity of the body shell is, well, first of all, we lift it up and look underneath and check for rust and check the floor pans and suspension mounts and all the rest of it. And the second thing we do is we take our paint meter and we run this on all the panels and look at the paint depth. And if we find, big variations in paint depth, we know that it's hiding lots of filler. And on this car, I've already done it, so I know that the paint depth is good. So it's consistent all around. The 200 number, this is 225 there, that indicates 225 micrometers, and that is 0.2 of a millimeter, which is about what you get with a bare metal respray. Okay, so what we're looking for here is big inconsistencies. It's a very precise instrument, and so even a little bit of filler will show up as a bigger number. But if you are under 1 millimeter or thereabouts, 1,000 micrometers, that is what you expect with a classic car. It's going to have some variations, but it's when nothing gets picked up by the meter, indicating you've got 2 millimeters of Bondo, that you know you have a problem. Okay, so there is nothing in this car, and I've already been through it, that is alarming. Okay, and underneath it's very clean, and I'll show pictures of that shortly. But we'll just go through the process of measuring all of the panels here. Okay. So there's a little bit of filler in the doors, which, you know, might have a rougher life than the rest of the car. But it's all, you know, except for a few small places, all under 1 millimeter, okay? There's nothing scary at all. And when you look at the bottom of the car, and I'll flash those photographs now, you can see there's not a speck of rust on the car. It's a brand new galvanized chassis, okay? So that is not a worry on this car. I mean, if I took a paint meter to this car, you know, I would get the same readings, okay? We've gone through the paint depth. The quality of the paint is also excellent. You know, I do not see any orange peel. I don't see the paint that's been sprayed on dry. You know, there's a small amount of waviness, but that was the way this car was when it was new. I can detect no scratches or imperfections around any of the bodywork. There's no door dings, there's no scuffs. And so really, you know, nothing kind of bad happened to it, and I don't see any damage at all. So it looks like it was freshly restored. Okay. The soft top, again, looks brand new. You know, it probably hasn't even been lowered, other than a few times. And we look inside, and the car is, of course, extremely basic. But the plastic that is there is not scuffed up. It's not warped. I don't see any evidence of plastic welding. How's that for? I thought my Land Rover had a simple interior. Not too hard to check the floor. It's just a corrugated metal floor, but it's got fresh paint. It's not scratched up. We can see all the new fasteners for the seat rails in here. And, you know, like literally it looks like it was just restored. The wiring harness is very basic. The seat upholstery, of course, is new. There are no scuffs or stains or visible wear on any of the seats. Getting in the car, it shows 96,000 kilometers on the chassis, and all of the indicators and plastic on the dash and lights and so on all look intact and all work to the best of my knowledge. We'll try them out on the driving video. We've got our shift lever here, which only goes in and out and turns. Actually, you don't actually move it like an H. We've got our choke down there, our handbrake, and not much else. I've got a switch for lights. and a switch for the wipers, a couple warning lights, and that's about it. The visors look good. All of this stuff looks, all the fasteners, looks like it's been regalvanized. The frame for the soft top looks like it's been powder coated. The soft top's new. All the interior pieces are new in here. It has new seat belts and again, new hardware for all the windows. So I can't fault the interior of the car or the exterior. It looks like it was just restored. Okay. For the door, you know, the mirrors, you know, everything looks correct on the car. Wipers, mirrors. We have got a little bit of the bonnet fouled this edge, so we got a little bit of a scrape there where the paint has flaked off. This looks like, well, not sure if that's aluminum or not. Anyway, all the trim pieces look straight. Alloy door handles. The weather stripping is all new throughout, or was 10 years ago. And the car has never been outside, so there's no UV damage. The light surrounds, the light gaskets are supple. The lights don't have any cracks in them. The bumpers have been refinished. The badging looks good. I can't really fault. There's not much trim here, of course, but for what there is, I can't really fault it. Tiny little bit of pitting on the chrome top of the headlamp. Signal lamps look new. The fasteners for the bumper, grille, etc. all look new. The grille. I'll give you the ID plate here. I'm sure that VIN will tell you where it was built, and I'm sure it's France, but there it is. And then I have another number down on the chassis, which I can show you there. And then I believe I found an engine number here. You'll see that. Okay. So those are all the numbers. I believe the correct type engine for the car could very well be the original engine, and I don't know that, okay? The engine has not been restored or rebuilt. It's my understanding that they just found good powertrains, and there's enough 2CVs out there that I'm sure they didn't have any trouble with that. So the engine bay, or the engine itself, looks like an original engine. The engine bay has been restored. You can see the shift linkage for the gearbox. It just kind of drops straight into the transmission. It's really quite funny. Okay, so this is the horizontally opposed air-cooled twin. You know, you've got a single carburetor, and of course there's no radiator, there's no radiator. There's a fan on the front. And it's all very simple, and it looks like we've got a new wiring loom. Not that there's much of that, and we can see everything's been, you know, done properly, and the cabling that's gone through the bulkhead has got the proper grommets, and it has, you know, new fasteners throughout, and you know, there's really just not much to this at all. But what there is, you can see clearly, and you know, there's no evidence that anything was sloppy. All the finishes, you know, are good. Everything's tied down properly. Looks like it has all the correct clamps and so on. No, you know, it's a professional restoration. The headlamps adjust, and they tilt on this bar, and there is a, you know, I guess this mechanism here going into the cabin, then tilts the headlamps to accommodate for the load differences. Okay, we have a new hood pad that's been installed, and that's about it for the engine bay. We even have a washer bottle that appears connected. Okay. When this car got disc brakes, inboard disc brakes, I think in the 80s, it also got this LHM mineral oil for brake fluid. So this isn't normal .3 or .4 brake fluid, it's mineral fluid, like the hydropneumatic other Citroens. Okay, in the trunk, we can see it's nicely finished. We have a matching tire. The wheels have been powder coated. We can see all the new fasteners that are in place for the seat belt anchors, and there's not much to it. I guess you can't really hide a lot with the Citroen 2CV restoration. Okay, let's take a look underneath this Citroen 2CV. Well, first we'll look at the right front tire. Tire, of course, looks new. Probably has just the 3,000 kilometers that the current owner put on it. These rims look new. Looks like they've only been painted once, and they do have some markings in them. You can see the mud flap is riveted on, and we can see the new light assembly and the new wiring. There is the air intake for the engine, and obviously this car doesn't look like it's seen any inclement weather. This is a new galvanized chassis that has been painted black, and we can see the new fasteners that are there. Driver's side wheel, again, of course there's no curb damage. It'd be pretty tough to do that with this car. And we can see the inner fender and rivets and so on. There is the exhaust coming out there, and it looks like it is a galvanized piece, galvanized exhaust, or at least zinc coated anyway. And there are the hangers. All right, so what else can we see? Well, you see the front fan and the finned sump for the horizontally opposed twin cylinder engine. That is the silencer. We've got this fore-aft belly pan on the car, which is kind of unusual on a car like this, and it probably also is a structural piece in that it strengthens the frame rails, and we can see it's louvered down there. All right, so let's just go to the back of the car, and we'll have the fuel tank back there. We can see the rear bumper attachment, and there's no crud or dirt that has made its way up into any of these cavities, and the fasteners still look new, and everything underneath has been coated. Exhaust is hung nicely with the rubber buffers, and on the inner rear fenders, we can see that they just bolt on actually. Okay, and it looks like we've got new plastic fuel tank. You can see this nicely powder-coated frame. But what's really interesting about this car is the suspension. So let's take a look at that. So these would be friction dampers leading to these kind of banana-like suspension arms. This looks an awful lot like what you find on a Porsche 911 actually. It's just that we've got them on the front and the rear instead of just the rear. And on a 911, there's a whole lot more things that are connected to it than just the suspension arm. But it looks like what the design is we've got a friction damper there, which then pivots the wheel in an arc. Now, as the car gets loaded and the suspension gets compressed, the wheel will actually go up and forward because that is the geometry of the suspension. So when this wheel assembly goes up, this becomes more horizontal, and then the wheelbase of the car actually changes, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so you've got the friction damper there, and then you've got a shock, just a normal shock. And in here, in this cylindrical tube, what you've got is a big spring. And it looks like both suspension corners then interact on the same spring, interconnecting both sides of the car with the friction damper, the shock, and the spring. So this is, I think that, not a suspension engineer, but the design of the car called for really long travel suspension. And if you put that with a conventional coil spring damper, the car would look awfully spindly. And, you know, to get the, I don't know what this car has for suspension movement, but it's probably more than, well, I don't know, I'm guessing 8 inches, 6-8 inches. You'd get a pretty funny looking car where the body would be, you know, sitting off the chassis by a considerable amount. But by repositioning the large spring inboard, conceptually not unlike what you find in a racing car actually, because they have inboard suspension as well. So that's really what this is taking a really long travel spring, mounting it inboard in the sills and connecting both suspension pieces to it. And so that's what gives you the ride comfort and the suspension travel you know, for this car. So it's really quite an ingenious arrangement that is you know, very simple, very accessible, and very effective. I mean, when we drove this car, you go over a bump. I mean, you see the bump on the road and you just don't feel it. I mean, you just don't feel it. And so Citroen's famous for their comfortable cars and with the ride quality, but most of that comes from the DS series with the hydropneumatic suspension. But even before that, with the 2CV, they've come up with a way to make a small car ride extraordinarily well. And it is really clever system. And I don't know of any other car that has anything really like that. I mean, it's really interesting. You can just see how basic and simple it is, but when you drive it, you see how effective it is as well. I mean, there's just hardly anything there. I mean, in rebuilding the suspension in the car, I mean, you could just put it up on jack stands on one side and do it. So anyway, very, very, very clever. There's not much else to show you underneath the car. It's pretty clear to me, I'm sure to anybody watching the video, that this car hasn't been used a lot since it's been restored, and that all the sort of the relevant pieces, you know, the structural pieces have been replaced, and there's just not much to it. You know, I'm not sure that the suspension was rebuilt, but it's so simple that it probably didn't have to be. You know, and there's no leaks. You know, sometimes the air-cooled engines can leak. We can see the exposed flywheel, and these are the inboard disc brakes. So that would have come about in, I think, the 80s, where the cars were modified for that. So we don't even have brake discs on the wheels. They're inboard, and it's just what a clever machine. So there we go. You know, we've now gone over, I think, every square inch of the car, and it virtually is as restored. It just hasn't been used that much in the last 10 years since the work's been done. Okay, so we'll do a cold start and driving video. I've got my friend Terry here who's holding the camera and will go out with me, mostly because I think he wants to drive the car. We'll start it, see what comes out of the tailpipe, make sure all the warning lights go off, and then take it for a quick spin, just really to demonstrate that everything works properly. Now, I haven't driven a 2CV It's been in lug nuts for about a week. It hasn't been started. I haven't started one before, so we're just going to give this a try. Maybe bring the camera around here. And bring it in a bit. Okay, so it's relatively straightforward. We turn the ignition on, and we get the ignition light, and then we're just, choke is down here. We'll pull that out and start it here. Well, that wasn't so hard. Look, the choke light even lights up. It's like, look at that luxury touch. There's a light on the end of the choke knob. It lights up. It's a little rip. Yeah. Put that away. And let's make sure it's a neutral.
Yeah, I think I killed the choke with me, but I doubt if it needed this temperature.
Yeah, so I don't think we need the choke anymore. Idle sweetly.
Yeah,
You can find here. So instead of trying to decide where reverse is, with a 300 SL in front of me and another Mercedes above, I'm gonna push it outside and then try to figure out the gears. Now, this does give me a way to demonstrate how light a Citroen 2CV is. So what I'm going to do is straighten the wheel, and then I'm going to grab the car, and then I'm going to roll the car and push it with one hand. And the floor.
Go that way. There we go.
So this is the only car that I've been able to move this
By yourself.
easily by myself with one hand. All right. So that is another advantage of a 2CV. All right. If you want to stop the car, well, you can just lean into it and stop. Push it uphill. Oh, just give it a little shove. All right. So we'll open the bonnet again. It's this clasp under here. Push it up, and then we've got the prop rod. And then let me fire it up again. Fires up really like on the button. But these low compression engines are like that, you know. You only have whatever it is, 6 or 7 to 1 compression. Fire right up. So I think I'm in neutral now. Let's see. All right, so that's neutral. You want to come up in the car, like shoot it in the car. The door handle is this little sort of peg here. I don't know if you can see that. This right here, you lift it up and it unhinges it, and we just have a tiny bit of choke. And now let's look at this gear shift. I believe that
Forward to the front. That's it. Push towards the front of the car.
that is reverse.
Yeah,
You're right on that.
There you go. Was
You're
right.
correct.
Yep.
And then
Reverse is straight.
Straight back.
First gear, second. That's first.
first.
Yeah. There you go.
And then second,
Yeah.
third, and fourth is over there.
There we go.
And you know what? There's a handy little diagram right in front of you. So you actually,
Chris, did you couldn't see
You-
everything but that.
you
That's
don't
it.
even have to guess. You
We know it
it's right
anymore.
there. We have a curious button here with a little picture of a reservoir. So if you hit that, it tells you that the light works. It's kind of funny. If the light comes on without hitting the button, it tells you there's a problem. But if you want to make sure that your system is functioning correctly, hit that and verify it. We've got a, I don't want to hit the wipers with the hood up.
No.
We got the lights there. Fog lights. It's fog lights. And what do you think that does? Horn? No.
No, the horn's usually on the... No. Squirter.
Oh, that must be the squirter.
Windshield squirter.
That's the windshield squirter there. We have
High and low.
high and low beam.
Yeah. That may be
And-
the horn pushing it. Try that.
Horn.
There you go.
There
I
you
know
go.
French cars.
There you go. Cherry had it. What did you have? A DS21?
Yeah, DS21 as well.
Okay, so this is back in neutral. And this knob here will act on the bar where the headlights are attached. So then that controls the level of the headlights. We've got another knob here, which is our ventilation screens. My early Land Rover had the same thing. And you've got a cigarette lighter. Of course, you got a cigarette lighter.
Where are the ashtrays?
And where's the ashtray?
Out the window, I guess. I don't know.
And well, there's not much to a Citroen 2CV, everybody. So let's just get a video of the engine running.
Yeah. Right. You got the choke all the way in now.
All the way in now. So that is ticking over cleanly at, well, it probably isn't any more than 500 RPM or something. Huh? Smooth. There's no knocking, there's no excessive valve noise, there's no unusual sounds. Let me rev it up a little bit. Does it choke?
Yeah. Oh, it's up to provenance. Did that stay? Take the hand off it?
Yeah, okay, that's the choke.
The other one's the
And
throttle.
this is the throttle. So
No mosquitoes being killed out the back. It's all good.
they designed this engine to run flat out for 1,000 hours. Such is the design. So runs nice.
It does.
Okay, so clutch in. There is no noise from the clutch release bearing. Sometimes you get that kind of grinding, whining noise for that. This will take a little bit of time to get it used to. Well, I'm just going to do a very short drive video. The objective is just to show everybody that the car works properly. I'm in an industrial area in Calgary in rush hour, so it's just not practical for me to do anything more with it. So we're going. This is for gear, right?
Yep.
Park off, choke off, and we're off. Yeah, you don't need any revs at all to start it, and there's no juddering from the drivetrain or slip from the clutch, so the take up is really nice. It looks like I can get it down to like 200 or 300 RPM. That is very easy. That's first gear.
There you go. You got a green one.
It doesn't require, I would say, any real mechanical sympathy. Like anybody can drive this car, which I guess you'd expect considering they sold, 10 million of them. So everybody did, well, every French person did. It sounds nice, and it feels very smooth. There's no, there's sort of a pleasant, air-cooled kind of thrum to it, but there's no there's no kind of nasty vibrations. The car feels really sorted. And the bumps, you go over the bump, and like even if I aim for a pothole, it doesn't feel like anything. And so, you know, there's 80 kilometers an hour, a little bit uphill, and it's fine. You know, the owner tells me that he can drive it over 100 on the highway, and that's entirely believable. It feels safe and it feels stable, and it's comfortable. So there's no reason why I wouldn't drive this car on a 50 or 100 kilometer journey. The car will do it.
If I can interject for a moment, my friend's driving his from Saskatoon to Cochrane in about a month's time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Same car?
Yes. His is an 87, blue one.
Well, very similar to that.
Yeah.
It's got good torque. Like the engine braking is quite significant. For 600 cc's, I wouldn't have expected that. Some of the Italian cars that are like low displacement, Fiat 500s and stuff like that, they feel like there's like nothing there below about 4,000 RPM. So it's a different feel than that. It's definitely a torquier engine, and you can kind of amble along. But I would be, I don't know, I'd be really pleased in puttering around this in the city. So anyway, I think that's all we can show you about the 2CV. This 2CV, it behaves itself. Everything works. It's nice to drive. It accelerates, stops, idles, and generally just behaves itself like a restored car should. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks to my friend Terry here for shooting this, and it's always fun to have a new automotive experience. Now cars, they're going all electrified. There's really not much difference in anything but the software. But when you get into these cars, every car really is a totally unique experience. So that is kind of what makes the hobby so interesting and fun. Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe. Lawrence Romanosky from Calgary, Canada.